Canadian Pink. This is a panel of youth-led activism, getting young people into weed politics. And it includes Monique Tovo. Yep. New South Wales Young Greens convener. Yeah. I'm not reading that well today. Ash Richardson. Hi. The Green Revolution. Hi. And Kashmir Miller. Yeah. Lismore Greens convener. Yeah. Okay, I need an English lesson. Okay. About Sniff Off. Olivia Barlow, panel facilitator, represents the Sniff Off campaign, launched in 2011. Sniff Off is a collaboration between Greens Senator for New South Wales, David Shoebridge, and the New South Wales Young Greens. Amazing. The campaign is a social media-based project that has been collating police statistics going back as far as 2009 and receives dozens of messages every week detailing the traumatic experiences supporters and their friends have with police. The campaign works to highlight the ongoing violations of civil liberties, committed through proactive policing measures like drug dogs and strip searches, and bring an end to the warrantless use of drug dogs in public places by the police. Awesome. So I'm going to give you this mic, Olivia.
Thanks.
Hopefully.
Is it better if I sit over there?
Up to you. No.
I'll sit over there. Okay, right.
I'm already if people take questions at the end, then you comfortable, and you have the floor.
Thanks.
Is Mike? Oh, okay, great. Thanks everyone for coming. Before I do some further introductions of our lovely panelists today, I just wanted to acknowledge the country that we're on today, both to the owners of the place Eichelheim, the Wangal people of the Eora Nation, and the owners of this place, the Widjabul Wearable people of the Bundjalung Nation. I'd like to extend my respect to all First Nations elders, past, present, and any First Nations people who are here with us today, and just affirm our collective obligation to speak truthfully and respectfully about the past, act on the problems of today, and strive for meaningful reconciliation. The reason the acknowledgement of country is so important to me, other than, the importance of acknowledging country, is when we're talking about the war on drugs, First Nations people across this country have been and continue to be targeted and harassed by the police in ways that far outstrip anybody else. They're overrepresented in statistics for stop and search, they're harassed by police, and it's a direct impact of racist policing that continues to this day. So when we're talking about the war on drugs, as much as it frustrates us, I think it's really important to acknowledge the ways that it disadvantages other people across the country. So I wanted to hand over and just do some introductions to everyone. Basically, who are you? What do you do? Why do we care? Can we start with Kashmir?
Hello everybody, my name's Kashmir Miller. I'm a local on Lismore. I've lived here my whole life, and I'm currently studying Bachelor of Law with Honours at Southern Cross Uni. And like I said, I am the convener of the Lismore Greens, which encompasses Nimbin as well, and I have been for a few years, and a member of the Greens for over 10 years now. And I was encouraged to join because of the coal seam gas movement of the Northern Rivers, where we saw the community fight back and take our power over corporate greed and dirty coal seam gas.
Woo!
And so don't cut me. It was all of the people of the Northern Rivers who did that. And then most recently, I was also the Greens candidate for the federal election in the seat of Page, which now encompasses Nimbin as well. So that was a fantastic experience, being next to Mandy Nolan in Richmond, of course. So it's fantastic to see potentially some Green women taking over politics for the Northern Rivers.
Hi everybody, my name's Ash. I'm the CEO and founder of the Green Revolution Australia, a newly founded non-for-profit organisation that is obviously for the legalisation of cannabis, but following that, the emancipation of those in jail and expungement of cannabis-related charges from people's records. As Olivia was saying, First Nations people are ineffectively directed by the war on drugs, and so for us, I know as a white woman I have a lot of privilege, and legalisation doesn't right every wrong of prohibition. So that's why I'm here today and join with these two wonderful women.
And hello, I'm Monique Tovo. I'm also part of the Tovo Greens and a co-convener for the New South Wales Young Greens. I'm based up in Olivia as well, so it's really nice to be out here today. It's a bit busier than usual though. I got involved in the Greens after the last federal election when I didn't think what was going to happen happened and you couldn't see it happen again. And we need to have change, and empowering young people is definitely the way that change is going to happen. So I want to be involved in that.
Thank you. So the reason I wanted to put this panel together today is a lot of the work that Sniff Off does tend to be dominated by young people. The war on drugs obviously disproportionately affects young people. Obviously, young people are not the only ones affected by weed, and it's great to be surrounded by all these elders that have been part of MardiGrass for the last 30 years, pushing the fight and really trying to reform drugs. But I think, unfortunately, what these punitive policing laws do around drugs is policing these public spaces, policing festivals and things. These are predominantly young people's spaces, and it's a really disempowering effect. It really shatters those relationships with the police from a really early point. We had a very interesting moment this morning in David and Steve Bolt's panel talking about laws and legalising weed, and the police decided to rock up and really try to show off and talk about all the ways that they were talking about police were completely inaccurate, and I thought that was a really a great demonstration, I think, of the ways that police have feel entitled to our public spaces and our time. And anyway, that's one of the reasons that Sniff Off does what it does to try and call out that kind of behaviour and call them in too, and bring them back into what they're meant to be doing, which is looking after our communities. Now, the reason that this panel came about from Sniff Off as well is there is this sort of impression that young people are disengaged from politics, that, you know, while we might really want weed to be legalised, we're not willing to get out there and push for it and fight for it. And as I think today really shows, we're here, we show up, and we really do care. So I wanted this panel to kind of be about our varied responses and experiences working in politics and activism, and some of the ways that we think we can get young people more involved. So my first question for the panel is, are young people really disengaged with politics?
I'm happy to rage on that one. No, young people are definitely not disengaged in politics. Definitely not. They just don't have much of an opportunity to have a voice in a lot of spaces, and that's quite frustrating for young people. I feel like the Greens is a great space where we have, you know, consensus decision making and grassroots democracy. So young people are heard, they are engaged, and you see that in the votes for the Greens. Because the people, you know, our policies represent community, because we are community and how we're established. So definitely not, young people are not disengaged. They're probably disengaged with institutions and structures and all of this historical bullshit that surrounds everything, but definitely not.
And just to build on that, I think not disengaged in any way, but maybe don't know where to go or what sense of direction to take, or you know, which is what's so great about the Greens and other, you know, activist groups, is being able to find your collective and find your passion and your cause and go, great, there's people here that I can join that can build on this. So I just wanted to add that on top of that.
And I think that something that separates young people from politics is the way that they perceive politicians as being people that are very much separate from them, because they usually do look a lot different from young people, being much older people typically, that they don't see as somebody that they can talk to about things that are important to them, that they're, you know, locked away in an office in Canberra or Sydney and they can't just have a chat with them, that a lot of the time we don't see things like Senator David Shoebridge walking around at MardiGrass in Nimbin being ready to have a chat, and I think that is so important in engaging that political awareness and care for young people, is making it accessible for them and showing them that it is about issues that they care about as well. It's not all about creating policies for people to get cheaper investment properties. It's about things about, free union tape, about drug laws, and those sort of things that the Greens push for, I think, are really key for getting young people engaged in politics, by showing them that we are thinking of them and that the people who are typically politicians aren't just going to be looking out for their mates forever. And I think the Greens are really important in changing that.
A lot of what we've heard today on panels and in discussions is that everyone has an idea about how to change the law, how to make this more fair, how to legalise cannabis in whatever shape or form they think is achievable for them. And what I've heard coming out of a lot of those discussions is, we really need a groundswell. We need to show people how much passion there is in this space and how much it really is important to people, that it's not just, we just want to hang out and get blazed, which, we do. But it's more than that. As we talked about, the war on drugs is literally ruining people's lives. It's disproportionately affecting minorities. I will take questions at the end.
I just had a suggestion.
Oh.
Yes. I'm from Canberra and it's actually legal to grow your own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just, I can't understand how the capital of the bloody country, it's okay,
Yeah.
but the rest is not. So why are they not taking weeds out of books here? I mean, is the palm not already being beaten that you can then take that and start running with it? It just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. And I think there is a lot of reticence among politicians, not the Greens ones, we hope, is to take that stance. And even though, look at the show out today, look how many people have made the effort to come to Nimbin and celebrate and protest in this way. But there is this feeling amongst politicians that will get them offside, or it'll get them offside with the alcohol industry. They're not willing to take that stand. And so a lot of the discussion isn't just about the legislative mechanisms that we can either follow from the ACT or we can take from a top-down federal approach, but showing up and getting a groundswell of people together and pushing the way that MardiGrass has for years, right? So I wanted to talk a little bit about your experiences as activists and what you think the best way of engaging young people, people that care about drug law reform specifically, in your own work. What are some experiences that you've had that you think we can apply in this area and get that off the ground?
I might take this one if that's how.
So I'm a medical cannabis patient myself. I became a patient in 2020, and that's actually where the Green Revolution came from, as my father had just passed away from cancer, and I have a long history of mental health problems, and I've been in the pharmaceutical industry, been in hospitals many times, and I decided I want to get medical cannabis because I know it works for me, and I want to be able to go into hospital and get help and heal and grieve and be able to come forward. I called 50 hospitals on the West Coast and the East Coast. Nowhere would validate my medication. Sorry, one place would validate my medication, and it was $136,000 for a 6-week stay. And that was a private hospital. So for me, going through that invalidation, that dehumanisation, and being suicidal at that time, I knew that it wasn't just me, that many of us had experienced something like this. And so that was the start. And for us, it's very much about involving everybody, because everyone does see legalisation of cannabis or the war on drugs in different ways and different perceptions. And so being able to listen, engage, anecdotal evidence, having events that are also fun and social, as well as political and serious, is sort of where TGRA comes from, and that's for our perspective.
And I think another important part of that I've experienced as being a very young candidate in a federal election is that it's just the first thing that people want to talk about, and they really want to stigmatise you and have this belief that young people are somewhat incapable of expressing ideas and passions and thinking of awesome policies for some reason, that it's And it's just completely untrue because young people are living through a generation now of housing crisis, of climate crisis, where some like people who went to uni for free and apparently more inclined to be able to represent us who are struggling with hundreds of thousands of dollars in uni fees sometimes, that I think that we really need to show that young people are smart, are engaged, and do have the drive, just like any other politician, if not more, to be able to do that. And I think that people like Stephen Bates in the federal parliament, who's 29 and the member for Brisbane, and that's a really great example of mobilising young people because his seat of Brisbane was a very young electorate. And by having somebody that they could really relate to, a young queer man in a very young and queer seat, was so amazing. And they saw so many people getting up and door knocking, and I see that being able to happen everywhere by being able to show the power that young people have that we've seen on the climate strikes, which is so inspiring. But we can't just see these young people and say, that's nice, now we're going to try to take their voice and tell them what we should do. Like, give them the mic, give them the power.
Yeah, and I think just touching on like empowering young people in that movement, young people are feeling so empowered after the school strike for climate, and they're starting to realise more and more through their experiences how everything is holistically problematic. It's just not one problem of climate change here. There's also, economic disparity everywhere. The cost of living is just nuts. They're watching their family suffer, they're suffering, and they want to do something about it. So they're looking for places to harness their energy and know what to do. And when you've got, the political education as it is in this country, which is very lackluster, and you don't know what avenues to pursue, I found the best way with engaging with young people as they come to the Young Greens and looking for somewhere to go is mentoring. It's a great opportunity to do that. If you have capacity to, support young people with the mechanisms to make change, how do you start a rally? How do you do an event? That's where people get keen to do things. And we've really tried to empower that with creating connections through having really fun events like something that you're doing. Drag Queen Bingo was one of the best things that we've done. It was solid, and you get people together for events that are fun but also have your shared community values where you also talk about things that are problems and how you can fix things. It's really, mixing in education with a fun environment, which I feel like after the last 2 years, young people really need a little bit of fun. So that's the way that in the Young Greens we try and engage young people and get them involved in politics and the movement and making changes, showing them that this can be fun and they can have a voice.
I also just kind of want to add in with my work on Sniff Off, obviously, and for those that don't know, Sniff Off is sort of a social media based campaign where we take reports from the public if they spot a sniffer dog in a public space, if they rock up to a bar or at a train station or whatever, or even just cops more broadly. And we take those messages and we turn them into posts on Facebook, on Twitter and on Instagram. Now, that obviously provides a service of just avoiding getting booked, but what we have seen with the Sniffer Dogs program specifically is that their use, not only are they up to 80% ineffective, but they actually really encourage really dangerous drug-taking behaviours in a way that you wouldn't necessarily if you didn't have these over-the-top punitive police responses. So people will see the dogs, they'll panic, they'll take all their drugs at once. Or they know that dogs are going to be at a pub or at a festival, so they preload, and then they get there and they're not well. They don't feel comfortable disclosing that, and tragic things have happened. So what I'm trying to emphasise there is it's not just haha, cops, avoid them, but it's actually providing a public good. And what I've really enjoyed watching from Sniff Off is just how many people are willing to send us photos or send through reports, which is often at great risk to themselves. The police will see you taking a photo of them, and even though it's perfectly legal for you to film police in public spaces, they will use as an excuse to come up to you. They'll ask where you're sending that photo, who you're sending it to, why you needed to take that photo in the first place. That kind of bully behaviour, that really entitled behaviour. But I think, not to beat a dead horse, because I feel like every time people put young people on a panel, they're like, let's talk about technology. But that project wouldn't work without it. And it's not to say that young people are the only people that use technology, but it's an exciting new frontier for politics, which has been really enjoyable to see the Snip Off campaign unfold using that as its predominant delivery mechanism. So one thing I also wanted to talk to you about is more specifically the war on drugs. So as we've kind of touched on, various groups of people are disproportionately and differently affected by the war on drugs. Initially I was just going to ask about young people because I didn't know who I would end up with on the panel. But it bears saying this is very exciting to be surrounded by women talking about weed. Which again is an area that has been a little bit underrepresented, I feel. So if you wouldn't mind just kind of expanding on the ways, either personally or professionally, you feel like you have interacted with or been affected by the war on drugs, and how you think those experiences are important to articulate in fighting against it, pushing against it.
So I am not somebody who partakes in drugs personally. But I have encountered it a lot because I went to a public school that had quite a few sort of people from low socioeconomic backgrounds and who did struggle with drug abuse at a very young age. And I think that with underfunding of public schools and the lack of kind of understanding of that, and the way that prohibition works on any level really is trying to push something away and pretend that it doesn't exist and just say don't do it, is not going to work. It's just going to make things worse because it's going to make it more dangerous, be sending kids out into the street to find drugs when this could be safely locked away behind a dispensary done legally, keep those people off the streets. And also being with more funding for public education in a world where cannabis is legalized, I feel like that will open up the doors more for trained, educated people to be in schools that have troubles with drugs and be able to give those kids the help that they need that isn't just telling them not to do it.
And yeah, just to expand on that point, I think, for me, I do partake in certain drugs, I'll be honest. And as a white woman, I had come from my parents are white, my father was mixed, his father was black, but, I have a lot of privilege, never been stopped by the police, nothing like that. But at the same time, the war on drugs I got affected by was pharmaceuticals, and from that becoming addicted to ice and heroin at 17. So having to go through all of that, and then finding cannabis at 18 and being able to come off everything and just use that. But for me, I want to use, I have that moral and almost ethical feeling of responsibility as a white person to go, this isn't affecting me, this is affecting other people in horrendous ways. It's up to us to say something.
And just cannabis is medication. Like, so many people need it for insomnia. Personally, know so many people that need it just to sleep, for anxiety. Like, the last few years have been horrific for young people, and they found it as a mechanism to help them cope with everything that is going around and the constant just unknowns that come with lockdowns and all of these changing and rules and environments and no schools or anything. So just to not have an area of certainty about cannabis, if it was treated as any other medicine like it should be, so that people have access to they need it, so they know where they can access it, so they don't have that additional thing that they can't control in their life. Like, we see that all the time with other drugs. Like, we know safe supply works. This has been proven over and over again that safe supply helps people holistically in their life. So it's just, it leads to those circumstances. Like, I had just this thing that we talk about, safe drug use. I remember this going to a festival. I used to love Grooving a Moo and all of those like really dance festivals, and just dogs being there, and my friend just like the amount of drugs that she took in that scenario because she felt so unsafe. And young people shouldn't be put in these scenarios where they're having to do this. Like, where is the safety in pill testing so they know what they're having and legalizing for personal use? Like, we should be having that conversation with young people and with community rather than constantly criminalising and penalising people for engaging in normal things.
Can I just add on that about festivals as well? It's another really sad part of the war on drugs is the amount of festivals that have been cancelled and removing those really safe, important spaces where young people can get together and have fun and, socialise and have, especially coming out of lockdown as well. They're really important spaces. But in the past, with certain other politicians who aren't so much around anymore, but their predecessors certainly hold the same values, that instead of accessing the problem of drugs, of people horrifically dying of drugs because they are taking a lot out of fear or that it's spiked, they just want to cancel the whole thing. And it's like, well, you could be giving these people a way to safely do drugs. Instead, you're removing the fun for everybody and putting those people who are going to be doing the drugs anyway, they're going to do them somewhere else, just as equally amount of no safe way to test them.
I think that's the crux of the issue, right? Is that everyone here knows that despite the massive police presence, hi boys, people are going to take drugs anyway, and it's not a choice about, if we just have enough police, people will just stop out of fear. People are going to take it, they're just going to find ways to do it to get around the boys. Whereas if we legalised cannabis, they wouldn't have to waste their time in the sun, and we could just have some fun. And that's obviously not an issue that affects young people, but I think you've all sort of pressed on the ways in which it does affect young people in ways that maybe we haven't seen in the past. And I wanted to talk about, I guess, what are the reasons that you did get involved in politics, and how can we get other people up here? How can we get more young people on these panels and making those changes and being willing to sort of talk about these issues and bring our issues, our lived experiences to the forefront?
So I got involved in politics because Liberal got voted in again, and I was like, fuck this, I have to do something. And as a woman that for most of her life has been told that she's bossy or something like that, I felt like the Greens was a great place for me to be bossy and show my, management ability. So I got in politics because this country is no longer matching my values when it comes to our policies and how we treat the people in it, including how we police them. Like, what a waste of resources. Oh my goodness, I used to work in health. Why are we not giving more money to nurses, for God's sake? Why do we not have ratios? Why aren't we doing stuff for our teachers? We're wasting money on the boys, love that, standing in the sun. So I got involved because I am sick of this country not looking like it should, for the people, representative of the people. I'm so sick of looking in Parliament and it not representing the people. Like, this is great. I've never been on an all-woman panel before, and that's amazing. And you just don't have that kind of representation. And we need more diversity to represent people. So that's why I got really involved in the Young Greens and stuck my hand up for co-convener, because I'm an elder Green. I'm 28, so I'm one of the older ones. I've got little baby Greens. We've got a whole bunch that are under 18, and I wanted to support them and their passions and what they want this country to look like and their future to look like. And I was like, well, I'm old, I know some things, I will help you with that. So that's why I got involved in politics, because I'm sick of this shit. I'm gonna do something about it. Woo!
So as I touched on before, I started in politics when I was about 12 due to, I think I was very lucky and I was able to see a way in which people power and progressive politics can actually make a tangible difference that you can see, which I think is a big disconnect between some young people and politics, is that they can't often see how you door knocking that one day or putting a leaflet there or pre-polling, how is that actually going to make a difference. But in this Northern Rivers community, especially here in Nimbin, we have seen for decades people saving forests and saving lands through people power, and I fully could see in the coal seam gas movement of the Northern Rivers how the Greens were so instrumental to that, and how your power can really make some significant change, which I always try, and that's what sort of motivated me to run for federal parliament as well, is that I knew the change I wanted to see, and I could see other politicians not doing it, and instead of just waiting and be like, oh, it'd be nice if someone came and they wanted to do this and that and they believed in this, it's like, oh, well, I do those things, so why don't I just do it? And thankfully, my party was very supportive of that and understood that young people aren't just somebody to run your TikTok account, like they have power in themselves.
And obviously I'm not I'm not from a political party, but for the Green Revolution Australia, you know, working alongside the Greens, Kate Fairman, David Shootridge, Tammy Franks and SA, excuse me, you know, that's where we're seeing the power shift, that's where we're seeing exactly tangible change, and to have those connections and be a part of it from a non-profit organisation perspective, it makes me very, very hopeful.
Awesome. So, say everyone in this tent and everyone who was in the tent before listened to us and was like, yeah, I'm a young person, I'm going to run, or I'm going to get involved in my local community, I'm going to do whatever it is that I feel will contribute to make the changes and create the world that I see. What would be your ideal vision of drug law reform in this country? Where do you think the most important areas that we need to make change are, and where are these people going to be putting their efforts into?
For me and for the organisation, we're, I mean, one, brilliant, yes, want that, love the passion, but, you know, there is room, there's a place for this passion, and, you know, for me, like I said, legalisation is great, but there's so much that's been done because of prohibition, so much hurt, so much pain. And so for us, following New York State's laws and regulations now, getting rid of the fit and proper person test in Australia, which is so detrimental to people who have experience in the cannabis industry or any other drug industry and aren't welcome to be a part of it because they're criminals. So for us, that's really what we're looking for. That'd be the best thing, be able to, you know, give back, and you know, everyone can have cannabis when they want it, when they need it, no matter what charges you have. So.
I was just going to say, to add on to that as well, in what a post-legalising cannabis world looks like, I think, is changing the way that we deal with the criminal justice system, which obviously will have a lot of weight taken off it, but in terms of other drugs, which hopefully would be decriminalised, but we need to change the resources from putting people into prisons into addressing how people actually get into these bad places to begin with, and prioritising rehabilitation and addressing the sources through those social and financial downfalls, rather than just putting people in prisons, which is a gigantic financial strain on all of us, but it's also one of the least effective ways to actually help people, and you're just taking people out of one dangerous situation and putting them into another. So yeah, drugs is a health issue, but it's also a criminal justice issue in how we address it, rather than just with prohibition, locking it away and trying not to think about it isn't going to work.
It should also be treated as a public health thing. My sister had multiple people in her year die because of drug use, whether or not it was what they thought they purchased or, you know, overdosing, and it was horrific. Pill testing should be a public health response, something that is provided by New South Wales Health to support communities in engaging in activities where they feel connected, where they create relationships. It's something that I can't believe that we're still having a discussion about when it's been proven to save lives and help community. So I would really like us to move towards a more public health response towards this and move away from all the crap that's historically been set up.
So what I'm hearing is defund the police, fund our health system, and stop locking people up for pointless shit. Is that a summary? Love that. So we are running a little bit early, but that's because we're so succinct and good at our jobs, and not my lack of planning. I wanted to throw to the audience, so this is kind of an opportunity to talk about your theory of change. Like, do we have it wrong? You know, is there something that you would like to be on the agenda for a post-legal society? Do you have any questions for the panelists? Would you like us to articulate on anything? You know, how about?
Or just be silent, that's cool too.
Yeah. I've sort of, you've said, I've heard the ladies talk about engaging young people, but would you have specific tactics? What would you use for a young person who's been brought up by a staunch National Party family, whose, you know, parents, oh no, we voted for the Nats, you know, they voted for the Nats, you know, and you know, it's expected of me to vote for the Nats. How would you go around, well, preferably turning them into a Green, or at least giving them some, you know, progressive ideas?
My family votes shooters and fishers, so I am the Green in the family. So from my own experience, what works best with, you know, talking to young people about what their beliefs are, it is like finding out what their beliefs are, because usually it's all historical. Like, I remember being told that the Liberals are the best economic managers from like when I was born. So it's having conversations, and that's where I see where the Young Green social media plays a huge role, is getting rid of the myths and helping people with education and awareness, because there is so much bullshit out there that you've got to sift through that is historical, that is from families that have voted that way for generations, because my dad, and the Nationals gave me this land and this time. So it's breaking down those relationships and looking and providing education around there is a different voice. There is a different way. You know, if the Greens get in the balance of power, we can change things, and we're going to take over eventually, but anyway, we'll get to that. So for me personally, how I work with young people to move them away when they come to the Young Greens, or we see them at an event, or we're at a market or something, is, you know, what do you care about? And having that meaningful conversation with somebody about what they care about, and then how we represent that. Or if we don't have anything in the policy, we talk about how the Greens can change, because we're very adaptable and flexible with our policy. So that's kind of how I have that conversation with helping people move away.
And if you don't mind, I want to add on top of that, I think, you know, beliefs in and of themselves aren't unique. You know, I'm going to be a little bit extreme here, but, you know, people are homophobic, people are racist, people are sexist, you know. That's not new. How you got to that perspective is where we can make change, because that journey is individual. And so I think being able to get, you know, to actually be able to talk to someone and go, hey, I'm not going to agree with what you believe in, but how you got there we can talk about and see if there's common ground, I think is a really good way to start discussions with the other side, to hopefully change their minds, right?
Yeah, and from somebody that came from very much not this story background, I think it's important that no matter what political background that your parents come from, whether it's Greens or Labor or Coalition or anything, you should still be addressing that. And that was something that I did as well, coming up very young in a very kind of green atmosphere. You don't want to just be doing it because your parents tell you to ever. So it's important to think about which actual policy are you voting for the Nationals on, or whichever party it is, and kind of, yeah, like, go onto their website and listen to their speeches in Parliament, no matter who you believe, and don't just blindly follow from any side. And in terms of speaking to other young people that might have these, unfortunately, in progressive parties and various parties, we do have to do the hard work of destigmatising ourselves, that people seem to just have these, like, people just think that we're like a joke, that we're literally like insane, that we don't know what we're talking about, and that we're like what Peter Dutton said, we don't wear shoes. Yeah, so we're all wearing shoes. I think that unfortunately that's not going to happen in one conversation. So I think with every conversation you have with somebody that does have those beliefs, if you can just inch them over a little bit, if they're not going to go staunch in that to staunch Greens or even Labor in one conversation. If you can just be like, go from, you know, the Greens are evil to maybe I just don't disagree with them. Like that's progress, and that's better than nothing.
I'd like to talk to that a bit as well. I think that this very like footy team approach and getting away from that is actually a really empowering process though, right? Like having those conversations with people and saying, let's just forget what we're wearing or forget who we're voting for a second and actually talk about the issues that affect you and why you're angry or what's disempowering you in your life and where can we find that common ground. And I think Liberal and Labor are so they're so similar these days that having that conversation is really empowering for people because they don't have to vote blue or red. They can actually talk about what they care about and find a place where they might be empowered to make that change or at least feel like they're part of a process of making that change. So having these conversations isn't just like a way of moving people away from the major parties or, you know, getting them to vote Green, but obviously vote Green. But like empowering people for politics, you know, the personal is political and it doesn't actually matter who you're voting for, it matters that you care and that you're actually engaging your mind and creating the world that you want to see.
Excellent points.
Hey, my name's Prince, so I like to get lit.
Nice.
Yeah, I reckon we should be more like Canada. Just, have all the shops and stuff with all this shit around.
Yeah.
I reckon that would be wicked.
Yeah.
It's the dream.
Great.
That's all I've got to say.
Yeah, for sure. But that really is so, that is so important, using those models of where it is done successfully. And it's like, wow, the sky didn't fall because we legalized cannabis. Everybody didn't become addicted. So yeah, it's super important using those examples and ACT as well. If within Australia we can do it successfully, there's no reason why we can't expand that.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that as a young, semi-old person, I think young people are just knocking it out of the park in terms of activism, particularly with the climate strikes. I had the privilege of being able to attend climate strikes last year because I had a job in Mooloolaba as a school bus driver. So I'd take the kids to school, then go watch them strike in the middle of the day. And the level of militancy and how articulate these young people were. Braden, I think, was one of the leaders. He's since joined the Greens, and incredible. I was just blown away. I just thought, this is amazing, and it kind of rekindled my sort of activist fire, because I've been an activist for a long time. But yeah, young people just want to save the world and party. And I think they're doing a great job of that, particularly with the school strike for climate. You know, that's what we need to do, strike. They're leading the movement in that we need to, you know, shut down capitalism, basically, I think, in order to, you know, fix this up. And young people are, you know, are where it's at. So I just had a question. How do you think we can connect with other movements, extra sort of party movements, like, say, the Australian Unemployed Workers Union, who are doing a great job, along with the Anti-Poverty Network, in fighting back against, you know, the really pernicious sort of regulations that unemployed workers have to live under?
I think that unions have suffered a great deal of stigmatisation, which is totally uncalled for when we see the conditions, like, you know, you got a 5-day working week because of unions and everything like that. So I think, personally, the Greens and the Young Greens, that's somewhere that we're trying to connect in that space, because things like ratios, Labor don't support ratios for nurses. The Greens are the only political party that come out and do that. So I definitely think there's more of a space for young people to work on connecting and realising that unions are also a space for change. That, you know, that's where you create those connections and people that have those similar, you know, needs and values and want something different out of spaces that have become problematic because they're stagnant for so long. So personally, I think that there needs to be a movement within the Greens and political parties for us to create connections with the unions who have historically just gone to Labor, who are no longer aligned with their values. But that's something that's going to have to happen over time.
I think solidarity is so important, and I think it's part of this larger approach to community building and creating this world that you want to see, right? Like, I get to talk shit about the cops behind me because I come from Sydney and I'll probably never see them again in my life. I have that luxury of being able to talk shit. But people that live around this area that probably will work with them and may even need their help in the future have to find ways of working with them and calling them in and forcing that change from within the institution, because we have to work with them at some point. And I think that solidarity and finding those connections isn't just, you know, working with the AU, WU and all the unions. It's part of this broader approach of we can find commonality and we can create a world, and we may not all agree on every single tiny little point, but we can work together to create a future that we're all happy with.
And it's also a tactic to keep us apart. You know, it's so much easier to isolate us as individual groups. And, you know, like you said, we all need to come together because we do have common goals. And being able to, you know, have these conversations, have panels like this is going to be silly. I feel so honoured to be sitting next to you guys. It's so fun. You know, because that's, you know, it's the hope that we all, I think, I hope are feeling from, you know, festivals like this and panels like this.
Just add quickly, I think these ladies have summed it up, but I think that just being able to take advantage of that shared wealth of knowledge that all of these different bodies have is ridiculous for any politician to believe that they have the answers and they have the perfect policy in their back pocket, or their couple of staffers might. When there are these people who do have that knowledge on each area, they've done the research, they've done all that work, all we have to do is invite them in and listen to them and not have the arrogance that so many politicians do, that they know everything, because you're a representative, you're not like the god of policy, you know, like...
Hi, thank you for your words today, your insights. I just have a question. There's a sign behind you that says overgrow the governments. So I'm wondering if you can envision a future or start implementing now how we can abolish the government. Never mind defund the police, abolish the government. Can you tell us how to do that? The next 20 years?
To the government, to the government representative, so to speak.
So I do believe in a theory of change that does involve the parliament to a certain extent, and that's not because I think it's the best model in the world, but I think it's the model we have, and I think we can reform it from the inside. And I know that a lot of people don't necessarily feel that way, but I definitely do. But what I would like to see is government change from, like I said before, this footy feeling of like state of origin, it's red or blue and it's nothing else. And I think the great thing about having a minor Labor government and having all these minority parties and these independents is that we have a way of keeping them accountable to the constituents that they should have been accountable accountable to a long time ago.
Yeah, and key to that, of course, is banning political dirty donations, which both the major parties run on, and I think that in a level of maybe not completely overthrowing the government, but just bringing it way down to the community so that that is who they account for. They account for people and planet and those without a voice, the wildlife, rather than the fact that the people who are killing our planet and our homes are the ones that are controlling the government in so many ways. So I think that is the key thing in bringing the government back to the model of democracy and the way that it was meant to run, because it's gotten so far away from that now that those big corporations have a seat at the table and people don't.
I'd love to hear what you think. Yeah. Yeah.
I actually haven't thought about it a lot myself, how to implement it, but I think we're seeing it now with the reaction to the Queen. We have a very divided response. So I'm from the era of anarchy and punk, And so there's a lot of assumptions here today. I'm not sure what age group you're thinking that got free education, but it wasn't mine. It definitely was an era before me. So that sort of changed in the 1980s, so I missed out on that free education. But really nothing is free anyway, even if I think it is. And also, I understand it is difficult for young people. It's actually difficult for everybody in the pandemic. And if you look around at what we saw in the pandemic, we never actually saw a lot of our own first-hand experience of people dying. So in my era, we had the HIV/AIDS pandemic, and the only reason they couldn't give us a vaccination for that was because they couldn't mandate it. So, you know, these things come around. If you live long enough, you'll get to see them, and maybe another pandemic in your lifetime as well. But yeah, and in our era, like in the 90s, like young people did it really hard. Like even if you're a student, and you know, I had to have 3 jobs to get through university. A lot of people couldn't survive that because we had a lot of harsh things to deal with, and they just, like my era, which is about 50 years old, we have a high suicide rate because we just don't want to, like we've lived a hard life and we just can't keep maintaining that, the stress on your body. Yeah, so I don't know what the answers are, but I have my own views that a lot of it is to do with plant medicine as well. So people like in my mum's era, they went the line of pharmaceuticals. Like their answer to everything was pill popping.
Yeah.
So I think that that's how we maintain autonomous lifestyles, is our relationship to plants. So I don't know what the answer is systemically, but individually it's to do with plants.
And you're so right in the sense of, like, you know, history doesn't repeat itself, but it usually rhymes. Like, it's always, you know, yeah, it's sort of, so, you know, and that's why I think, obviously we're talking about younger people, but for everybody has gone through a period of struggle, unless you're, you know, the 1% or, you know, whatever. But, you know, I really stand with you in terms of that. We all understand pain in a different way, and being able to have conversations like this and go, yeah, I see you and you see me, I think is really, really important.
One of the reasons that attracted me to the Greens is how much of a role that government does play, but it plays a role of actually contributing positively to people's lives, rather than just selling off things that I personally think should be public assets. I think the government should represent and be for the people, by the people, and I don't think what we have now is that. So I totally understand, you know, the need to overthrow it, but I think we need to create mechanisms in place, like they've talked about, that people are actually being supported by. People shouldn't have to have 3 jobs to go through university. You know, you should be able to get enough money if you need it to be able to support you with bettering yourself, whether it's through education or, you know, mental health or just the inability to work. I just don't think that we have a government that is supporting people, and if we did have that, then we wouldn't need to overthrow them, because we'd have a supportive community that allows us to be the best person that we can be. So that's my hope for the future, is that everything has a way that's publicly owned, publicly for the people. You know, the people are represented by the MPs rather than just a couple of staff that's coming out with policy ideas. That's what I would love for the future.
Can I just add to that as well, talking about plant medicine and these sort of alternative ways of dealing with health, is that I would really hate to see legalising cannabis go the way of other pharmaceuticals or the alcohol and the tobacco industry. I think when we're talking about legalising, it needs to come from this ground up for the people approach, rather than, you know, just another industry that can lobby government, and we'll have cannabis reps at the table telling us that actually MDMA is just for the dirty hippies, but cannabis is fine, you know. We have to bring that approach to all of our all of the changes that we want to see. Does anyone else have any more questions? Love it.
Anybody else? So good?
Thank you so much,
Right.
guys.
Good
Good chat.